The Last Gas Station on I-40 Scary Story, published by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1, Empty Tank, Empty Road. The last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desolate plains of western Arizona in bruised purple hues. The heat of the day, merciless, even in late November, clung to the asphalt like a phantom limb, radiating through the thin floorboards of Alex's dusty Ford sedan. The air conditioner groaned its last, a wheezing testament to its futility against the unrelenting desert furnace. Alex squeezed the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white against the cracked vinyl. His gaze darted across the endless stretch of I-40, a black ribbon carving through the ochre landscape. Abandoned towns, their skeletal remains bleached bare by the unforgiving sun, dotted the horizon like forgotten teeth. The silence was a living thing, pressing against his eardrums, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the tires and the rustle of wind through the dead scrub. He could swear he felt eyes burning into his back from unseen corners, a prickling sensation that sent shivers down his spine. A cough from the engine, more sputter than purr, shattered the uneasy peace. Alex glanced at the fuel gauge, a cold knot forming in his gut. Empty, dead empty. Panic gnawed at the edges of his mind, the irrational fear of being stranded in this barren wasteland gripping him like a vise. He pressed the accelerator, urging the Ford onward, praying for a ghost town, a truck stop, anything to materialize out of the shimmering heat haze. Just when his hope dwindled to embers, a glint on the horizon, catching the last dying rays of sun, made him slam on the brakes. A mirage, he thought, his vision blurring with fatigue and desperation. But no, it was real, a sign flickering neon green against the encroaching darkness, rusty spur. Gas, food, rest. A sigh of relief, deep and primal, escaped him. He steered the groaning Ford onto the cracked asphalt driveway, the rusted chain hanging limply across the entrance, offering no resistance. The station itself was a relic of a bygone era, a single-story adobe building with chipped paint and peeling advertisements for long-defunct brands. A single flickering gasoline pump stood sentinel, its chrome dull and pitted. The silence grew thicker inside the station. Cobwebs adorned the shelves, stocked with expired candy bars and dusty souvenirs. A moth danced erratically in the dim light cast by a single bare bulb dangling from the grimy ceiling. Behind the counter stood a man, his weathered face etched with a map of past hardships. He was tall and lean. His eyes, the color of desert sand, held a depth that chilled Alex. "Welcome to the rusty spur," the man rasped. "Fuel? All fancy?" "Just fuel," Alex stammered, eyeing the man with nervous curiosity. "And maybe some water." The man nodded, his expressionless face betraying nothing. He pumped the nozzle, the metallic clang startlingly loud in the stillness. "Traveling far, son?" he asked, his voice a dry whisper. "California," Alex mumbled, avoiding the man's gaze. "Just passing through." "Long weighing on an empty tank," the man said, a hint of something that might be amusement flickering in his eyes. "Things can get tricky out here, after dark." Alex shivered, the hairs on his arms prickling. The setting sun bled crimson behind the gas station, casting long, menacing shadows. An unease, sharp and unsettling, twisted in his gut. He forced a smile, wanting to dismiss the feeling as paranoia, but the man's words echoed in the vast emptiness around them. As the fuel gauge crept toward full, the man held out his hand. "Fuel's on the house, son. Consider it a welcome to the desert." Alex hesitated, 1,000 questions bubbling on his tongue. But the silence, heavier than ever, pressed down on him, urging him to leave. He mumbled his thanks, paid for the water, and retreated to the car. Slipping behind the wheel, he glanced back at the gas station. The man was gone, The neon flickered erratically, casting dancing shadows on the cracked pavement. The rusty spur seemed to shrink into the darkness, melting back into the desert as if it had never been there at all. Alex pulled away, his foot trembling on the accelerator. He knew, with a cold certainty that chilled him to the bone, that his journey, far from over, had just taken a turn down a road darker and more twisted than he could have ever imagined. Chapter 2. Rusty Welcome. The engine coughed back to life, a guttural growl that shattered the desert silence. Alex pulled away from the rusty spur, the unsettling encounter with Earl clinging to him like a bad dream. He glanced back at the gas station, a lone silhouette against the vast canvas of the night sky. The flickering neon sign was now a menacing red eye, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with an eerie rhythm. Suddenly, a piercing shriek tore through the air, a sound like metal scraping against bone. Alex slammed on the brakes, his heart hammering against his ribs. He strained to hear, but the desert wind whipped around him, whispering secrets in the dry grass. He peeked back at the rusty spur, expecting to see Earl and his strange assistant, Millie, but the station was eerily quiet. Was it just his imagination, that haunting cry? He continued down the road, the incident gnawing at his nerves. The headlights cut through the darkness, revealing the desolate landscape in stark relief. Every rustle of the wind, every whisper of the engine, sent shivers down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that unseen eyes followed his every move. Then, a flicker of movement caught his eye. A lone figure, cloaked in shadow, stood at the edge of the road, silhouetted against the moonlit horizon. Alex slammed on the brakes again, fear clawing at his throat. He squinted, trying to make out the figure's features, but the darkness swallowed them whole. He waited, holding his breath, but the figure remained still, a silent sentinel in the wasteland. Finally, mustering his courage, Alex stepped out of the car. "Hello?" he called out, his voice a tremor in the vast emptiness. The figure remained silent, unmoving. He took a tentative step forward, then another, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Just as he was about to turn back, a voice, soft as a whisper, drifted from the darkness. "Don't go, Alex." He spun around, his hand instinctively flying to his pocket where he kept his old rusty switchblade. But there was no one there. The voice had come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a chilling echo in the desert night. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice hoarse with fear. A giggle, high and brittle, like wind chimes against broken glass, drifted on the wind. Then, a chilling whisper, barely audible, "Turn back, Alex. This road leads nowhere." Panic flooded him. He scrambled back to his car, his eyes darting around, searching for the source of the voice. But the road was empty, the only sound the rhythmic thrumming of the engine and the howling wind. With shaking hands, Alex climbed back into the car and slammed the door shut. He threw the car into gear and sped away, the unsettling encounter echoing in his ears. The engine roared, a desperate defiance against the oppressive silence of the desert. He glanced back in the rearview mirror, but the road behind him was empty, swallowed by the darkness. But, as he drove, a flicker of movement caught his eye in the rearview mirror, a fleeting glimpse of something dark and shapeless, moving with unnatural speed across the desert. He slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The figure shot past, a blur of darkness that vanished into the night. Alex slumped back in his seat, his breath ragged. He knew, with a bone-chilling certainty, that he wasn't alone. The rusty spur and the unsettling encounter with Earl and Millie were just the beginning. He was on a road leading to something far more sinister than he could have ever imagined, and the desert held secrets that were not meant to be revealed. Chapter 3. Ghosts of the Highway. Dawn broke over the desert, painting the sky in soft hues of amber and gold. The rusty spur, bathed in the pale light, seemed less menacing than the shadowy specter it had been the night before. Still, Alex couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at him. He slept fitfully, plagued by nightmarish visions of swirling shadows and disembodied voices whispering his name. He found Earl and Millie in the cluttered back room, sipping coffee from battered mugs. Millie, her pale skin and obsidian eyes accentuated by the sunlight, offered him a lukewarm smile. "Sleep well, traveler?" she asked, her voice like the rustle of dried leaves. Alex mumbled a response, his gaze drawn to the strange symbols carved into the peeling wood paneling. They echoed the ones he'd glimpsed on the gas pumps and the flickering neon, like an arcane language whispering forgotten secrets. "What are those?" he blurted out, pointing to the paneling. Millie's smile faltered, replaced by a fleeting flicker of something dark in her eyes. "Just old desert stories," she said, her voice tight. "Things best left undisturbed." Earl, his weathered face etched with a lifetime of secrets, grunted in agreement. "Some roads," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves crunching underfoot, "hold memories better left forgotten." The statement chilled Alex to the bone. He sensed a truth hidden beneath their words, a darkness veiled in cryptic warnings. He pressed on, curiosity warring with apprehension. Have there been others, travelers who never made it out of here? The room fell silent, thick with unspoken tension. Millie's eyes, locked on his, glittered with something he couldn't decipher. Finally, Earl spoke, his voice a low rumble. "This road," he said, gesturing towards the endless stretch of highway outside, "can be unforgiving. Sometimes it takes its toll." Alex felt a cold sweat prickle his skin. The implication hung heavy in the air. Disappearances? Casualties claimed by the unforgiving desert? Or something more sinister? Something hidden in the shadows Earl and Millie kept so close? He spent the day trying to ignore the growing sense of paranoia, fueled by their cryptic pronouncements and the cryptic symbols that seemed to follow him everywhere. He explored the station, finding dusty maps with marked locations hidden beneath layers of grime, strange instruments he couldn't recognize humming with unseen energy, and an abandoned workshop filled with tools for tasks he couldn't fathom. As dusk approached, casting long predatory shadows, Alex retreated to his room. He tried to sleep, but the nightmares returned, more vivid and terrifying than before. This time, the shadowy figures took shape, their eyes burning embers in the darkness, their voices a chilling chorus, rasping his name. He woke with a scream, his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. Driven by a morbid curiosity and a flicker of defiance, Alex crept back to the back room. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on Earl and Millie's faces, making them seem more like creatures of the night than humans. "What is this place?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "What are you doing?" Earl's eyes, like chips of flint under the flickering light, held him captive. "This," he said, his voice a low growl, "is a crossroads. A place where paths diverge and destinies are rewritten." Millie stepped forward, her eyes glowing with an unsettling luminescence. "And you, Alex," she whispered, her voice a seductive caress. Alex stumbled back, fear clawing at his throat. The cryptic words, the unsettling atmosphere, the growing certainty that he was trapped in a game he didn't understand it all coalesced into a horrifying truth. He wasn't just passing through the desert. He was a pawn in a game played by forces he couldn't hope to comprehend. As the darkness deepened and the wind howled its eerie song, Alex knew his journey had taken a turn down a road far more treacherous than he could have ever imagined. The night, pregnant with unseen dangers and whispered secrets, held the answer to his questions. but the price of unraveling its mysteries might be higher than he was willing to pay. Chapter 4. The Abandoned Diner. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. Alex, his nerves frayed and his mind reeling from the revelations at the rusty spur, climbed into his car, his heart thudding a frantic tattoo against his ribs. He needed to get away, to escape the clutches of this malevolent place before the shadows claimed him entirely. But as he turned the ignition, a discordant groan ripped through the engine, followed by a sickening silence. The car wouldn't start. Panic clawed at his throat as he tried again and again, each attempt met with the same desolate silence. Trapped, his only options were the desolate highway stretching before him and the ominous shadows of the rusty spur looming behind. Desperation gnawed at him, driving him towards a faint flicker of light in the distance, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. It was a diner, its once gleaming chrome now dulled and rusted, its windows boarded up, its neon sign flickering erratically, casting dancing shadows on the cracked pavement. A morbid curiosity, tangled with a flicker of hope, urged him forward. The diner door, its hinges groaning in protest, creaked open with a touch. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of dust and decay. Cobwebs draped the broken booths, and chipped plates lay scattered like fallen teeth on the grimy floor. Yet, amidst the desolation, the flickering neon sign cast an eerie glow on a contraption in the corner, a tangle of wires and tubes connected to a pulsating metal sphere, humming with an unseen energy. A primal fear, cold and sharp, sliced through Alex. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was no ordinary diner. This was the heart of the rusty spur's secret, the source of the unsettling atmosphere that had clung to him like a shroud. Drawn by a morbid fascination, he cautiously approached the machine. The sphere pulsed with a rhythmic throb, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. Wires snaked from it, like veins carrying an unseen lifeblood, connecting to a series of dials and gauges, their needles dancing erratically. As he reached out to touch the sphere, a guttural voice, like gravel grinding against bone, echoed through the diner. Curious, aren't we? Alex spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. A figure emerged from the darkness, cloaked in shadow, its eyes burning embers in the gloom. It was Earl, but somehow different, his face contorted in a grotesque mask of power and malice. This, Earl rasped, gesturing towards the machine, is the heart of it all. The lifeblood of the station. We harvest it, the energy of travelers like you, and feed it to the machine. It keeps us sustained. Horror washed over Alex. The disappearances, the cryptic warnings, the unsettling atmosphere, it all made sense now. He wasn't just a traveler. He was prey, a potential source of fuel for the machine's insatiable hunger. Panic surged through him. He had to get out of there, to warn others, to expose the darkness that festered beneath the desert surface. But Earl, his eyes burning with a predatory glint, blocked his escape. You won't leave, Earl snarled, his voice a low growl. You're part of it now. Fuel for the machine, sustenance for the darkness. Alex braced himself, a desperate defiance fueling his resolve. He wouldn't become another victim, another cog in their macabre machine. He lunged for Earl, a primal scream tearing from his throat, but the figure danced away, a blur of shadow and malice. A chase ensued, a desperate ballet of terror played out in the dilapidated diner. Alex dodged falling debris, vaulted over overturned tables, his adrenaline pumping like a war drum. He tasted blood, the metallic tang, a testament to the unseen blows he'd received in the darkness. Just as he felt the grip of exhaustion close in, he stumbled upon a hidden passage, a narrow tunnel leading deeper into the diner's bowels. With a final burst of strength, he slipped through, the darkness swallowing him whole. He didn't know what awaited him, but escape, however perilous, was his only hope. As the door slammed shut behind him, plunging him into deeper darkness, Alex knew this was just the beginning. He had stumbled upon a truth far more terrifying than he could have imagined, and the fight for his survival, and perhaps the souls trapped within the rusty spur's grasp, had just begun. Chapter 5. Millie's Secrets. The passage, cold and damp, led deeper into the belly of the rusty spur. Blind and breathless, Alex stumbled forward, guided by a desperate need to escape the horrors he'd witnessed in the diner. The metallic tang of blood filled his mouth, a grim souvenir from his encounter with Earl, but his fear far outweighed the throbbing pain. He emerged into a dimly lit cavern, lit by flickering gas lamps, clinging precariously to the rough-hewn walls. Machinery hummed ominously, its rhythm like a malevolent heartbeat echoing through the cavern. And there, in the center of it all, stood Millie, her silver hair catching the flickering light, her eyes burning with an unnatural luminescence. "Alex," she said, her voice a soft chime amidst the industrial cacophony. "Surprised to see me?" Anger, raw and burning, surged through Alex. He lunged at her, the memory of Earl's words twisting his fear into rage. "What have you done? What is this place?" Millie didn't flinch. Instead, she raised a hand, and the machinery fell silent. Her eyes, once so captivating, now held a fathomless sadness. "This, Alex," she said, her voice a whisper, "is the engine of our torment. And I," she gestured to herself, "am its prisoner." A wave of disbelief washed over Alex. Millie, the enigmatic assistant, a prisoner. It was too much to process, too jarring a juxtaposition to the unsettling truths he'd unearthed. "What are you talking about?" he gasped, his rage receding in the face of her sorrow. Millie lowered her hand, and the machinery shuddered back to life. "I wasn't always like this," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I was a traveler, much like you. Lost, desperate. Earl," he promised sanctuary, a way out of the harshness of the desert. "But the price," she shuddered, tears glistening in her eyes, "was my soul." A horrifying realization dawned on Alex. Millie wasn't human, not anymore. She was a bound spirit, her essence tethered to the machine, fueling its insatiable hunger for life energy. And perhaps that was his fate too, if he didn't escape. "He sabotaged my car," he accused, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. "Trapped me here to feed your machine." Millie nodded, her face etched with pain. "It wasn't him, Alex," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It was me. Earl holds me captive, my spirit bound to this cursed place. But you can break it. Destroy the machine, and we can both be free." Doubt nodded Alex. Could he trust her? Was this a desperate ploy, a trap to drain him entirely? Or was there a shred of humanity flickering within Millie's spectral shell? He saw the pleading in her eyes, a silent desperation mirrored in his own. He weighed his options, stay and fight, a lone wolf against a nightmare, or take a chance on Millie's cryptic guidance. He had to try. "Tell me how," he said, his voice hoarse but resolute. "Tell me how to destroy it." Millie gave him a faint smile, the first genuine expression he'd seen on her face. "There's a weak point," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Behind the main console, a pulsing core. Destroy it, and the machine will crumble." Alex knew it wouldn't be easy. The console was guarded by shadows, by whatever Earl called upon to protect his macabre engine. But he had a glimmer of hope, a sliver of a plan. And for the first time since he stumbled upon the rusty spur, he felt a flicker of defiance, a determination to fight back against the darkness he'd stumbled into. As Millie whispered the details of the machine's vulnerabilities, adrenaline pulsed through Alex's veins. He knew the battle wouldn't be fought with guns or fists, but with wit, courage, and perhaps a shred of forgiveness for the broken spirit who held the key to their escape. The fate of not just himself, but Millie and perhaps others lost to the rusty spur's grasp rested on his shoulders. He inhaled a deep breath, the dusty air tasting of defiance. It was time to face the shadows, to gamble everything on a desperate hope. Time to destroy the machine, and with it, his own nightmare had come. Chapter 6. The ritual begins. The air crackled with an unseen energy as Alex crept towards the control center, Millie's whispered instructions etching a desperate map in his mind. The machinery thrummed with a malevolent rhythm, and a sickly sweet scent of ozone hung heavy in the cavern. Just ahead, bathed in the red glow of the pulsing core, stood Earl, his weathered face contorted in a mask of twisted glee. "Trapped, little moth," Earl rasped, his voice echoing in the cavern. "Your life force will fuel the engine, fuel my power." He reached towards a series of levers, his gnarled fingers twitching with anticipation. Alex knew this was it. No turning back. With a roar that rivaled the machine's, he lunged, a desperate hope fueling his attack. Earl cackled, deflecting Alex's blows with surprising agility. He was older, frail, but the machine seemed to imbue him with unnatural strength. The fight was a blur of shadows and metal, the cavern reverberating with the clang of fists against flesh and the rhythmic pulse of the core. Just as Alex felt exhaustion gnawing at him, Millie's voice, faint but insistent, cut through the cacophony. "The cables at the base. Sever them." His eyes darted to the monstrous machine, finding the cables Millie spoke of. Hope flared, a flicker in the encroaching darkness. With a final surge of adrenaline, Alex threw Earl off balance, sending him crashing against the controls. "Scram, Alex!" Millie screamed, her voice straining. "It's too late for both of us." Before Alex could protest, a surge of raw power erupted from the core. The machine pulsed with blinding intensity, tentacles of dark energy lashing out. One struck Millie, engulfing her in a chilling vortex of darkness. Her scream, a sound of pure agony, ripped through the cavern before being swallowed by the machine's roar. Frozen in horror, Alex watched as Millie disintegrated into particles of light, her spectral form dissolving into the pulsating core. Rage, raw and primal, surged through him. He wouldn't let her sacrifice be in vain. With a guttural roar, he clambered onto the machine, dodging tendrils of energy that hissed and spat like serpents. His fingers grazed the cables, cold and slick with energy. One swift cut, then another. Sparks erupted, the machine shrieking in protest. The core pulsed ever brighter, threatening to explode. Alex knew he had to get out. Now. He sprinted towards the cavern entrance, the ground vibrating beneath his feet. Just as he reached the opening, a searing wave of energy slammed into him, throwing him through the air. He landed hard on the dusty road, his body a tapestry of pain. He looked back at the cavern, expecting to see the rusty spur consumed by the explosion. But instead, it stood defiant, the machine silent, bathed in an eerie, pulsating glow. The darkness didn't seem to recede with the machine's silence. It felt deeper, vaster, as if the core's pulse was merely a heartbeat within something far more ancient, far more menacing. A primal fear, cold and sharp, clawed at his throat. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky with a false hope, Alex stumbled to his feet, the weight of Millie's sacrifice heavy on his heart. He had escaped the rusty spur, but the desert held more secrets, more darkness than he could have ever imagined. And amidst the desolate landscape, the echo of the machine's pulse lingered, a grim reminder of the entity it had awakened and the fight that was far from over. He had to warn others, to unravel the secrets of the desert, to stop the darkness before it consumed everything in its path. Millie's sacrifice had bought him time, but it was a gift he wouldn't squander. He closed his eyes, drawing strength from his grief and defiance, and turned his back on the rusty spur, stepping into the unforgiving dawn, ready to face whatever horrors awaited him on the road ahead. Chapter 7: Escape into the Desert. The sun beat down mercilessly as Alex stumbled across the cracked asphalt, his lungs burning, his legs leaden weights. Behind him, the rusty spur stood silent, an ominous sentinel against the endless horizon. But silence didn't mean safety. Every shadow seemed to writhe with movement. Every whisper of wind carried Earl's raspy laughter. He could hear them, feel them closing, in shadowy figures spawned by the machine's dark energy, their forms flickering like phantoms in the heat haze. Panic hammered against his ribs, each breath a rasping effort. He couldn't keep this up, not in this unforgiving terrain. His vision blurred, the landscape warping into a grotesque mirage. The road shimmered, stretching and twisting like a snake in the sun. Sand dunes rose up like hungry beasts, and skeletal trees clawed at the sky, their gnarled branches reaching for him like accusing fingers. Suddenly, a memory, sharp and visceral, pierced the haze. A blinding light, a metallic scream, the earth shuddering beneath his feet. He was a child, lost and terrified, the memory of a car crash playing on repeat in his mind. The smell of burning rubber, the taste of metallic fear, the choked cry of his mother. The vision faded, leaving a chilling residue of dread. Was this why he was drawn to the rusty spur? Was this desolate wasteland somehow connected to the trauma that haunted him? The questions gnawed at him, but he had no time to indulge them. The shadows were gaining ground, their whispers twisting into taunts, promising a grim end in the heart of the desert. He stumbled into a dry wash, seeking some meager shelter from the relentless sun. His throat scraped like sandpaper, his tongue a swollen mass in his mouth. He knew dehydration was closing in, another predator stalking him in the desolate landscape. Hope, a flickering ember in the wind, offered him a chance. He remembered a map Millie had shown him, a hidden spring nestled deep within the canyon walls. It was a desperate gamble, a trek beyond his remaining strength, but it was his only hope. Guided by the memory of Millie's map, he clambered over razor-sharp rocks, pushed through thorny bushes that tore at his skin. The sun beat down on his head, turning his vision into a kaleidoscope of shimmering colors. Yet, he pressed on, fueled by a primal defiance, a refusal to succumb to the desert's cruel embrace. As the sun dipped low, casting long, predatory shadows across the canyon, he finally saw it, a sliver of emerald green against the parched earth. The spring, a life-giving oasis in the arid wasteland. He collapsed beside it, gulping down the cool water, feeling it seep into his parched body, carrying with it a surge of renewed strength. As the darkness deepened, painting the canyon walls in shades of blue and black, Alex leaned against a rock, his mind filled with fragmented memories. The car crash, the blinding light, the chilling whispers of the desert. They all seemed to swirl around him, pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite grasp. Then, with a terrifying clarity, he saw it. The connection, stark and undeniable. The light from the crash, the energy surge that had thrown him from the wreckage. It was the same dark energy pulsing within the rusty spur. He wasn't just drawn to the machine, he was a part of it, somehow tethered to its malevolent core. The realization filled him with a cold dread. Was he destined to be another victim, another fuel source for the darkness? Or could he somehow find a way to break free, to sever the connection and stop the entity that lurked within the machine? As the stars glittered like distant eyes in the vast desert sky, Alex knew the fight was far from over. He had escaped the rusty spur, but the shadows still followed, and the secrets of his past lay buried deep within the desert's heart. He had to unravel them, face the darkness within and without, and break the ties that bound him to the machine's nefarious purpose. The fate of the desert, and perhaps his own soul, hung in the balance. Closed his eyes, the cool wind whispering through the canyon, and vowed to face the dawn, ready to confront the demons of the past and the horrors that awaited him in the road ahead. Chapter 8: The Hidden Town. Dawn bled into the desert sky, painting the canyons in soft hues of rose and gold. Alex, fueled by a renewed resolve and a gnawing dread, emerged from the canyon and back onto the road. The rusty spur loomed in the distance, a malevolent monolith against the rising sun. But he wouldn't succumb to its pull just yet. He had a purpose, a glimmer of hope he'd unearthed in the oasis's embrace. His map, the one Millie entrusted him with, spoke of a hidden town, nestled like a secret within the folds of the canyon walls. A town built and sustained by the rusty spur, fueled by the stolen life force of unsuspecting travelers. He had to find it, not just to confirm his suspicions, but to understand the scope of the machine's reach, the lives it had consumed. The journey was arduous, a brutal trek under the relentless sun. But the image of lifeless eyes, of Millie's spectral sacrifice, spurred him forward. He clambered over treacherous rocks, navigated through prickly brush, his skin scratched and bloodied, but his spirit unyielding. And then, as the sun reached its zenith, a glint of emerald caught his eye, a ribbon of life amidst the parched landscape. A verdant valley, cradled by the canyon walls, unfolded before him. And nestled within it, like a forgotten dream, lay the hidden town. But it was a nightmare masquerading as a utopia. The houses, once vibrant, were now shells of their former selves, windows vacant, paint peeling like scabs. The streets, once bustling, were now silent, the only sound the wind whistling through empty doorways. A chill, deeper than the desert's bite, crept down Alex's spine. He hesitantly stepped into the town, each creak of a loose floorboard, each sigh of the wind through barren trees echoing in his ears. In the town square, he found a well, its bucket hanging motionless, a grim metaphor for the life stolen from this place. A weathered sign stood crookedly, the paint faded, yet the message stark: "Welcome to Oasis Grove." Population hopeful. Each letter was a hammer blow to his already battered heart. These weren't just victims. They were lured in by hope, by the mirage of a haven in the desolate wasteland, only to be drained of their essence, their souls trapped within the machine's insatiable maw. Rage, hot and fierce, ignited within him. He wouldn't let Millie's sacrifice be in vain. He wouldn't let this town, this symbol of false hope, stand. He had to destroy the machine, sever the connection, and release the souls it held captive. His gaze fell on the town hall, a sturdy building at the heart of the square. A desperate plan, formed in the furnace of his anger, flickered into existence. Town hall served as a conduit, channeling the stolen life force back to the rusty spur. If he could sever the connection, it could cripple the machine, weaken its hold on the trapped souls. He knew it was a gamble, a suicide mission, But inaction was no longer an option. He owed it to Millie, to the stolen souls, to himself. With a deep breath, he steeled his nerves and steeled his heart, ready to face the darkness that festered within the town hall. As he pushed open the creaking door, a wave of stale air, thick with unseen dust, washed over him. The interior was shrouded in semi-darkness, the only light filtering through cracked windows. Cobwebs draped the decaying furniture, and a heavy silence pressed down on him, broken only by the rhythmic thump of his own heart. He fought through the oppressive atmosphere, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. He found a control panel, a web of wires and levers, humming with an eerie energy. This was the lifeblood of the town, the conduit to the rusty spur. With trembling hands, he reached for a lever, a primal need to break it, to shatter the machine's hold, overriding his survival instincts. But as he pulled, a guttural voice sliced through the silence, sending shivers down his spine. "So, the moth approaches the flame," Earl snarled, his eyes burning like embers in the gloom. Alex spun around, adrenaline flooding his veins. Earl, flanked by shadowy figures, stood at the doorway, a cruel smile twisting his face. The fight was inevitable, a desperate dance between life and death in the dusty confines of the town hall. But this time, Alex fought not just for himself, but for the countless souls trapped within the machine's grasp. He fought with the fury of a cornered animal, with the weight of Millie's sacrifice fueling his every blow. The town hall echoed with the clang of metal against flesh, with the rasped shouts of Earl and his minions. Shadows lashed out. Chapter 9. Final Stand. Fight in the town hall was a desperate ballet of dust and fury. Alex, fueled by a cocktail of grief and purpose, fought Earl and his spectral minions with the ferocity of a cornered animal. But Earl, empowered by the stolen life force, seemed almost invincible. Just as Alex felt his strength waning, a memory, sharp and brutal, pierced the chaos. The blinding light, the metallic scream, the taste of fear. A connection sparked in his mind. The car crash, the entity that drew him to the rusty spur, its power resonated with the terror that had haunted him for years. With a surge of desperate clarity, Alex realized his own trauma was the key. The entity fed on fear, on desperation, and his childhood terror played right into its hand. He had to turn this vulnerability against it, use it as a weapon to sever the connection and free the trapped souls. He pushed Earl and his shadows aside, ignoring the throbbing pain in his bruised ribs and gashed arm. He stumbled towards the shimmering portal at the back of the town hall, the gateway to the rusty spur's heart. His steps were heavy, haunted by the specters of his past, but his resolve was ironclad. He stepped through the portal, the air crackling with raw energy. The cavern hummed with the machine's pulsating core, a monstrous entity of swirling darkness taking shape before him, tendrils of shadow lashing out like ravenous serpents. "You think you can stop me, child?" The entity boomed, its voice a chorus of whispers, of stolen screams. "I am fueled by their despair, their deepest fears. And yours." It hissed, its form slithering closer, are a feast laid out before me. Alex stood his ground, his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. He closed his eyes, plunging into the abyss of his childhood terror. He relived the crash, the chilling touch of death, the suffocating despair. Then he remembered his mother's hand clasping his, her voice a beacon of unwavering hope. He let go of the fear, replacing it with a fierce defiance. He opened his eyes, staring into the swirling darkness with unflinching resolve. "My fear doesn't belong to you anymore," he said, his voice trembling but not breaking. "It's fuel for my fight, not yours." A wave of raw power, tinged with an echo of his mother's love, erupted from within him. It slammed into the entity, disrupting its form, causing it to shriek and recoil. He pushed forward, channeling the force of his defiance, his purpose. With a guttural roar, he reached out and touched the machine's pulsating core. The energy crackled, searing his skin, but he held on, channeling the light of his newfound self-assurance. Core pulsed erratically, the machine shrieking in protest. Then, with a deafening crack, the core imploded. The cavern shuddered, debris showering down as the machine crumbled, its tendrils of darkness dissolving into wisps of smoke. The trapped souls, their spectral forms shimmering like fireflies, surged out of the machine, drawn to the light Alex had created. His legs gave way, his body a tapestry of pain, but he watched as the souls streamed towards the portal, returning to the bodies they had been stolen from in Oasis Grove. Earl, stripped of his stolen power, crumpled to the ground, a withered husk of his former self. Alex, his head spinning, felt Millie's presence, a gentle flicker of light amidst the receding darkness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice a disembodied caress. You set us free." Then, as quickly as it came, the light vanished. Alex sank into the darkness, the weight of exhaustion claiming him. The fight was over, the darkness defeated, but his journey, he knew, had just begun. He had scars, both physical and emotional. But he also had hope, a newfound strength forged in the furnace of his fight. As he drifted into unconsciousness, a single thought echoed in his mind. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a survivor, a beacon of defiance against the darkness. And his story, woven with the threads of fear and resilience, would serve as a warning, a testament to the power of hope, even in the most desolate of landscapes. Chapter 10: Redemption and Scars. The cavern shuddered, a death throe echoing through the crumbling edifice. The machine's core, once a pulsating heart of darkness, was a gaping maw of shattered metal, spewing forth wisps of smoke and fading energy. Alex, battered and bruised, sat amidst the debris, the weight of his victory pressing down on him like a tangible force. His gaze darted around the cavern, taking in the spectacle of his own handiwork. Earl, stripped of his stolen power, lay crumpled and whimpering in the corner, his menacing shadows dissipated into nothingness. And amidst the dust and rubble, spectral forms shimmered the souls the machine had imprisoned, finally unbound by Alex's defiant stand. They drifted towards him, drawn to the light he ignited within himself. Whispers of gratitude, murmured blessings, and echoes of long-lost names filled the air. Some, faces alight with newfound serenity, simply drifted upwards, seeking the unknown peace that awaited them beyond the cavern's confines. Others lingered, their eyes seeking solace in Alex, the unlikely liberator who had faced down the darkness and emerged into the sun. One soul, a woman with eyes as soft as desert moonlight, stopped before him. "You set us free. You faced your own shadows and banished ours. Thank you, Son of Light." A lump formed in Alex's throat, choking his reply. He had come to the rusty spur seeking answers, seeking escape from the ghosts of his past. But in facing the darkness, he had found something far more profound: his own strength, his resilience, and the power of his untainted spirit. As the last remaining soul drifted upwards, the ground trembled, cracks spiderwebbing across the cavern floor. Dust rained down, obscuring the skylight that had been his hope of escape. The machine's demise had triggered its own destruction, and the cavern was collapsing in on itself. With a surge of adrenaline, Alex scrambled to his feet, ignoring the throbbing pain in his injured ribs. He had to get out, now. His legs pumped like pistons as he navigated the treacherous terrain, dodging falling debris and clinging to crumbling rock faces. Just as a final, deafening roar echoed through the cavern, he scrambled through the collapsing skylight, tumbling onto the sun-baked earth in a heap of dust and grit. He lay there, gasping for breath, the sun a searing brand on his exposed skin. He coughed, spitting out dust and the acrid taste of fear, but beneath it all, there was a flicker of triumph. He had survived. He had faced the darkness and emerged, scarred but undefeated. The rusty spur lay behind him, a smoldering ruin in the distance, a grim monument to the horrors he had faced and the courage he had discovered. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert landscape, Alex rose to his feet. He didn't know where the road ahead would lead, didn't know if the echoes of the machine would ever truly fade. But he did know one thing: he was free. Free from the rusty spur's grip, free from the shackles of his past, free to carve his own path in the vast expanse of the desert. Climbed into his car, the familiar rumble of the engine a comforting beat against the silence. He turned away from the smoldering ruins, the desert wind whipping through his hair, carrying away the dust and the whispers of the past. He put the dusty highway in front of him, the endless ribbon of asphalt stretching like a promise into the twilight. He was a survivor, a traveler with scars etched not just on his flesh, but on his soul. And as he drove away from I-40, leaving the nightmare behind, Alex knew that his journey, the real one, had just begun.